pattering softly onto the dry earth. Somewhere in the seasonal transition between Cheongmaeng and Ipiha, Yeonwoo stepped out of the police station, her gait heavy and entirely devoid of strength. Having suffered under the excessive obsession and relentless gaslighting of her superior, she had sought help from the law, but the endeavor ended in disaster. She was simply no match for the 5 high-priced lawyers from a major firm hired by her boss. Inside, the officer had delivered a stern warning, telling her that if she wasn't careful, she could be punished for filing a false accusation. He condescendingly suggested she try to have a kinder heart, remarking that from what he could see, Mr. Yoonseok was merely expressing his affection in an excessive way. The officer had dismissed her, telling her not to come back to the station like this and to go try to have a good conversation instead, claiming the man didn't seem impossible to talk to. Standing outside, Yeonwoo stared blankly at the thick streaks of falling rain. Amidst an atmosphere as bleak as the dark clouds hanging overhead, a vehicle soon came to a stop directly in front of her. It was her boss's sedan. The car window lowered, revealing her boss. When he smiled, Yeonwoo immediately turned her head away. Though his face wore a seemingly tender smile, she found his snake-like eyes utterly horrifying. In a voice laced with mockery, he asked Yeonwoo if he hadn't repeatedly told her not to do anything useless. He pointed out that she was wasting money and time for absolutely nothing to gain. Yeonwoo opened her umbrella without much reaction, trying her best to stay as far away from him as possible as she walked diagonally down the steps. The car door swung open, and her boss stepped out. Her pace quickened at the sound of the door closing, but she was caught in an instant as he slipped his body beneath her umbrella without warning. He told her that if she was going to treat someone like trash, she should at least offer an apology before leaving. He added that while his lawyers wanted to lock her up for false accusations, he had held back out of consideration for her future, mockingly suggesting she should learn to be grateful. His eyes, looking down at her, felt as noisy as the sounds of the city. As if peering into her darkened expression brought him the greatest joy in life, her boss let out a victorious laugh. Thrusting his head forward, he whispered into her ear, telling her not to struggle and to just give up, because she could never escape him. His voice was so low that the voice recorder she had secretly turned on would be useless against it. He issued a final threat, warning her that if she tried to cross him like this one more time, he wouldn't stay still. He demanded she accept the situation while he was still treating her like a human being, declaring that as long as Yeonwoo was alive, her owner was Yoonseok. When she met him with silence, he added chillingly that he would only let her go when she died. He straightened the umbrella she was holding, stepped out from under it, and gave a small wave of his hand. With casual authority, he announced that he would mark yesterday and today as paid leave, demanding she show up for work the following day and implying she knew the consequences if she failed to appear. For a fleeting moment, madness flickered in his eyes as he reiterated that finding her was nothing, warning her not to make him any angrier and to just come to work quietly because his leniency had a limit. Only after he finished speaking and returned to his car with a swaggering stride did Yeonwoo bite her lip hard. Once his vehicle departed, the cars carrying his lawyers followed suit. The torrential rain hammered against the top of her umbrella. After staring silently at the rainwater flowing into the drains, Yeonwoo slowly moved her feet. That night, at 3 a.m, well past midnight, Yeonwoo left her home carrying a single suitcase. It was a house with time still left on the lease, and she hadn't even been able to submit a resignation letter to the company, but she left Seoul immediately. Her boss's warning seemed stuck to her skin, unable to be erased. The further she got from Seoul, the more fear surged within her. Yet, she knew no one would be able to help her. If she just stayed trembling in fear, she would never be able to escape him. She had to run, because the only way left to escape was to vanish completely, or, as he had said, by dying. It was just as she was emerging from the blue-tinted haze of dawn. After driving for about 3 hours from Seoul, one could reach Yeongtaemayan in Moksan County, nestled comfortably at the foot of Yeosongsan. Seeing the rain begin to subside, President Nam Tae-jin of Seongheon Construction let out a groan and turned his gaze toward the car window, noting aloud that the rain was finally stopping after putting on quite a show for a spring rain. Nam Seongheon, who had given the seat of honor to his uncle and sat beside him reviewing documents, looked up. Watching the valley fog rise thickly around the mountain, Seongheon could feel the thin dawn air and quietly remarked that it was a relief. President Nam agreed heartily, admitting he had been incredibly anxious that it might rain during the upcoming groundbreaking ceremony. Seongheon turned a page of his documents without much of a reply. As the vice president of Seongheon Construction, the reason he had arrived in Moksan County so early was because today marked the groundbreaking for a large-scale resort project. A few years prior, hot spring water had been discovered by chance in the county, its temperature aligning perfectly with legal standards. Quick to catch the news, Seongheon Construction had bought up the entire area, including a site where a small motel had originally been planned. It was the start of an ambitious project reflecting the company's determination to create a premier hot spring landmark in South Korea, a complex resort combining hot springs, an amusement park, a ski resort, and a golf course. Vice President Nam Seongheon had personally pushed the massive endeavor through from start to finish. President Nam Tae-jin, who was born and raised in Moksan County, crossed one leg over his knee and shook his foot contentedly. He proudly claimed that Moksan County needed to be good to the Nam family, asserting that whether in the past or now, it was their family that fed the region. After the large-scale resort project was confirmed, a string of favorable developments followed in the surrounding area, including unplanned train lines and highway extensions, keeping the president in an excellent mood. He gloated openly, stating that the rivals at Yoonseok Construction must be incredibly jealous, even if they hit it, and took joy in the thought that it served them right. Thinking of the distress of the competitor who had lost out, a gravelly laugh burst out of him. The fact that Yoonseok Construction, which had previously been flying high, had stepped down from the #1 spot was entirely a feat achieved by Seongheon. President Nam Tae-jin laughed heartily until his body warmed up, then took a steady breath, glancing over at his nephew. Seongheon possessed an extraordinary eye, immense skill, and a bulldozer-like personality that stopped at nothing to achieve his goals. This was self-explanatory just by looking at Seongheon Construction's report cards, which had risen vertically since Seongheon began participating in management. There was no plan he hadn't fulfilled, and no goal he hadn't achieved, at least, not yet. When Seongheon met the praise with silence, the conversation cut off for a moment. As the monotonous road continued, President Nam Tae-jin grew quite bored. He tapped his knee with his hand and glanced at Seongheon again, lamenting internally that he had shared the car thinking he might have a companion to talk to on the way, but his nephew was far too silent. He realized it had been a mistake to dream of a casual chat in the first place, silently wishing he had just taken his own car. Raising his eyebrows, President Nam spoke up again, asking Seongheon exactly how long he intended to stay down there. Seongheon answered smoothly that he wasn't entirely sure, but planned for about a month. The president sputtered in surprise, questioning if a month wasn't far too long and asking if it was truly all right to leave his seat at the headquarters vacant for that length of time. Seongheon countered calmly, asking why there should be any worry about the vice president being away when the president himself was there. President Nam quickly told him not to rely on him, shouting that he didn't know a single thing about what his nephew actually did. Seongheon put down his documents and turned on his tablet PC at the same time. He explained patiently that the early stages after the groundbreaking were the most critical, assuring his uncle that he would handle things so there would be no confusion with the headquarters work, telling him not to worry. As Seongheon finished speaking and fixed his gaze on the tablet, silence fell once more. President Nam Tae-jin straightened his back and rolled his neck. He relented, muttered that if Seongheon insisted then so be it, but grumbled again about whether he was constantly interrupting his work, repeating that he should have just gone in his own car. Seongheon glanced ahead and noted that it was already too late to change plans since they were almost there anyway. The president declined to ride any further together, stating he needed to catch a few winks because his fatigue wasn't going away after playing golf for several days straight. A short while later, the two vehicles came to a stop. President Nam Tae-jin climbed into his own car that had been leading the way, while Seongheon moved to the seat of honor, immediately turning his gaze back to his tablet PC. Their destination was printed clearly on the sparse signposts along the road: Yeonwoo, Domyeongjae. Domyeongjae was a modern-day tangible cultural property as well as the main ancestral seat of the Nam family, serving as the house where Seongheon would stay for the upcoming month. They drove along the quiet dawn road where nothing else moved, heading directly toward the place that lit up the path. The tedious highway road finally ended, and the rural path began in earnest. By now, dawn had fully broken, and Seongheon's vehicle followed closely behind President Nam Tae-jin's car. Once the rains, suddenly, the driver let out an exclamation as the vehicle came to an abrupt, jarring stop. The sudden deceleration caused Seongheon's body to lean forward slightly before he straightened back up. The startled driver looked back immediately, apologizing profusely and urgently asking the vice president if he was all right. Instead of saying he was fine, Seongheon simply gave a small wave of his hand, sensing that the problem wasn't the sudden stop itself. He asked what was going on. The driver explained nervously that the president's car ahead had stopped suddenly because it appeared they had inadvertently splashed water on a lady by the side of the road. Repeating the word in inquiry, Seongheon leaned his head to the side and looked out the window. It wasn't entirely clear due to the thick fog crawling along the ground, but the place where the car had stopped was a roadside bus stop. Through the haze, he could discern that the woman standing there had been covered in muddy water from the waist down. The bumpy rural road and the dense fog had caused a problem. The thick, heavy wheels of the luxury vehicle had failed to pass smoothly over a pothole, violently splashing the collected muddy water onto the pedestrian. While common sense and basic instinct would usually dictate apologizing first to someone standing by the road, the driver of the lead car behaved differently. Seongheon tilted his head slightly, silently watching the interaction unfold. The driver from the front car barked aggressively at the woman, saying that they were incredibly busy and had no time to delay, pompously declaring that a very important person was riding in the vehicle. He callously told her to take some money and send her clothes to the dry cleaners. The woman's expression was so utterly blank it was as if her features had been completely erased, yet the dismissal wasn't enough to hide her inherent radiance. Even from a distance, the striking harmony within her small face was apparent. When she didn't instantly move, the driver snapped again, raising his voice to shout that they didn't have time and demanding to know if she hadn't heard him mention the very important person in the car. Seongheon's gaze, which had been fixed on his tablet PC the entire journey, was tied for the first time to the wet landscape and this total stranger. He noted that she clearly wasn't a local, nor did she look like a tourist. He wondered silently whether she was leaving the area or if she was coming back, harboring more questions than were necessary for a brief roadside encounter. Outside, the driver continued his impatient urging, crudely telling her that if she wasn't protesting for more money, she should just take the cash, dismissively adding that the laundry bill wouldn't come to much anyway. Watching the scene play out, Seongheon reached out and opened the car door. His long, sleekly shod foot touched the damp ground, and the gravel beneath the thick fog crunched softly under his step as he moved forward to intervene.